Helen Gardener devoted her life to championing women's rights and decrying the sexual double standard. Today, hardly anyone has heard of her. Her remarkable story reveals just how little we as a country know about women's contributions.
Good morning. We bid you welcome. We do not ask what you believe or expect you to think a certain way, but only that you try to live a kindly, helpful life with the dignity proper to a human being. Welcome all who believe that religion is wider than any sect and deeper than any set of opinions. Welcome all who might find in our friendship strength and encouragement for daily living. Good morning and welcome to the Universalist Unitarian Church of Farmington. My name is Elizabeth Knight. I've been a member here since, I think, 2016. I am currently the board president. I've also served as the chair of the Sunday Services Committee. And I wanted to just share real quick with regard to what I do on the board. The board handles all the business of the church, makes sure things run smoothly from a financial standpoint, but we are always looking for volunteers across the board when it comes to our committees. There's a lot of other committees that help in the work of the operation of the congregation, including Sunday Services, which puts on what you see here today, membership, which provides a lot of our social events and fun activities like our Treats on the Trail we had a few weeks back, as well as publicity and information for folks out in the general public. If you are looking to get involved and you want to either share some of your talents, or this is a great place to grow a new talent, I've been very supported in my leadership roles here and growing leadership skills. So if you're interested in contributing your time, please see me, and I'd love to match your talents or your needs to something that the congregation would be glad to have your help. This morning, we are fortunate to have member speaker Paul Bailey with us. I'll tell you a little bit more about him later in the service. And we also welcome returning pianist Christina Dragon, who's filling in for our music director Diana Munch today. I'd also like to extend a special welcome to any visitors today. After service, we invite you to stay for coffee hours, which will be downstairs in Adams Hall. As a quick aside, coffee hour will be shortened today because at noon we are having a memorial service for B. Eglinton. If you plan on staying, the service will be up here at noon and there will be a light luncheon afterwards. And even if you don't know B and you want to stay, you're also welcome as well. When in the meeting house, we're observing COVID precautions and wearing masks regardless of vaccination status. Religious education classes are being held in the RE classrooms during the service, and an usher can direct you if needed. Joys and sorrows can be shared later in the service after our offering. You're welcome either to come up to the microphone to share. We also have blue joys and sorrows cards in the pews that you can fill out and give to the ushers during the offertory, and I will read them later in the service. If you would like to text your joys and sorrows, there is a phone number listed at the top of page 2 in your order of service. We just ask that you include your name in the text if you'd like it to be included. Please join me now in stating our mission found on page 2 of your order of service. We seek answers everywhere, include everyone, and live with compassion. This morning we have a couple announcements. Gloria or Barb, you guys can come on up.
Hi, Gloria Tweedy from Social Action and the Aesthetics Committee. We're going to ask you to help a little bit with decorating our outside teeny trees. you can take 1, 2, or how many, and fill out a little card here that says, I am thankful for, I am grateful to, I am whatever. The one where's Barb? Was, and Barb put it on the tree already, was I am thankful for B, who taught us how to share, care, be kind, and be gutsy. Thank you, B. So I'm going to pass these out.
Hi, I'm Barb Iovan, Chair of Social Justice, and I want to talk about a fundraiser that we're going to be doing starting later on this month. A friend of mine had posted this on Facebook this summer, and love her organization, so I supported it by purchasing an item. But I was so impressed with everything about it that I talked to Mark and the rest of the fundraising committee, so we're going to do this later this month. I just want to kind of give you an overview. So what we're going to be doing is selling gourmet popcorn. And I have, if you could pass them out on each side. Yeah, I have some show and tell for you. So I've never experienced a fundraiser that was simpler to do. So how many people here use social media? Facebook, YouTube, Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, anything. Wow, there's only 3 of us that use any of those? Okay, great. And I know there's even more than are here today. So what we're asking you to do very simply is for 4 days later this month, we're going to ask you to post a blurb, very simple. You know, I belong to this awesome church. We're doing a fundraiser. Click on this link below. Here's our code, UUCF, and it'll take them to a page where they can choose gourmet popcorn to buy. Now, the popcorn is between $9 and $11 a bag. I bought it. I was so impressed with the way it was shipped. It wasn't smashed and a bunch of, a glob of popcorn. It was really good. I was impressed with the product. But the greatest thing about this fundraiser is we net a full 50% of what is sold. So if we even had just 15 people, these are numbers I just did because I don't like math, but if we had just 15 people post this for 4 days and they each sold just 10 bags, we would net $750. I'm reading the materials from this organization called Double Good, and people raise $2,000, $3,000, $5,000. It's incredible. I'm starting small because it's our first time. It's only going to work if people will post this for 4 days. That's the way it's going to work. Now, if you're a person that says, yeah, but I don't do any of that, I don't even email, because you could put the link in email, but if you say, I'd like to support it, but I don't do any of that stuff, what can I do? Well, not to confuse the two things, but I'm also I'll personally have the old-fashioned paper and pen where I'm going to write down, Dorothy wants a bag of caramel corn, and do it that way. And our fundraising committee is going to pay for the shipping in that case. So if you buy the old-fashioned way, I can accept your cash or check, and the turnaround, and we'll do that starting on the 17th until the end of the month, just to give you more time. But the thing about this, it's really a good product, and if you're posting this on any of your all of your social media, that's when you're done. You're done just by posting it 4 times. You don't handle the popcorn, you don't handle anyone's money, which I know people hate doing. So it's really simple. And to net that kind of amount to me is amazing. And we'll get it within 2 weeks of when the sale concludes. So I just think it's a great fundraiser. I hope you'll join me. If you'll just leave those 2 boards in the last pew, I'll pick those up. I think that's it, and I'll have more. It's so simple to do. Next meeting, I'll have a video that explains it, and it takes literally 1 minute. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
Tom, sorry. One more.
Good morning. Few things from membership committee, but as a prelude to that, seeing a couple people in the back who have spent an incredible amount of time over the last few months on various voting issues. Keep in mind, Tuesday's such a big day. If you haven't voted already, vote. Now that has nothing to do with membership. Three things that are going on. We're going to start a round of chalice circles this Tuesday. I believe Barb is going to be facilitating it. They're very good discussion groups, chance to get to know each other, trade ideas on various things. I think the first one's going to be on democracy. Is that right? Last an hour and a quarter. You can pop in. If you know you're going to be there, let us know, just so that we can get some idea of the crowd, the number of chairs we need, things of that sort. The 20th, 2 Sundays from today, we're going to have a new UU and U session, informative discussion group. What this one is about, it's designed for newer members and people who may be interested in our congregation, our religion. The first one's about the general concept of UU, what it is on a national basis, its history, things of that sort. It should be an interesting session. Final thing I'll mention, Thanksgiving. We've put a note in the magnet, but some people have not gotten around to reading the magnet. Many of us, most of us, have families that we get together with for Thanksgiving. Some of us don't, or some of us just would like to socialize some on Thanksgiving. So if there's enough interest, we'll have a Thanksgiving dinner here, potluck type thing. If you're interested, let Hope Sorensen or me know that. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Always good to hear all the different activities that are going on in the congregation outside of Sunday. Please rise as you are willing and able for our first hymn, number 118, This Little Light of Mine, and we will sing all 3 verses. Little Light of Mine, and we will sing all 3 verses. This morning, we are excited to present Paul Bailey as our speaker today. He'll give a reading prior to his presentation, but Paul Bailey is a longtime member of UUCF and a Chrysler retiree. And always my favorite part of Paul's bio, he lives in Garden City with his beautiful wife, Nancy, and 3 cats. Please welcome Paul Bailey.
The reading is from The Bluegrass Blade. Mr. B.O. Flower, editor of the Arena magazine, had this to say about Helen Gardener. I know of no living writer who can carry home a great truth to the heart of the humblest reader so tellingly as Helen Gardener. She lives in a glory all her own. She was not a creature of mere chance. The honors that fell upon her and belonged to her, she worked for, struggled for, and won. She was brilliant in wit and polished in diction. She was ever kind in her dealings with others and always stood ready to lend a helping hand to the oppressed and distressed. Her pen, powerful in the extreme, was always and ever employed on the side of right, truth, and virtue. She assailed the shams of society with unfaltering logic. One purpose animated her life, her very being, and that was to rescue from and to uplift out of the trammels of superstition and vice those of her own sex, and she was fearless in the defense of their rights, exposing the wrongs to which they were subjected by sanction of law. Simple and unaffected, Helen Gardener lived the life she would have others live. In this, she taught by example even stronger than by her written words. America has possessed but one such woman, rich in oratory. Her voice rang like the clarion notes of a bugle from the public rostrum, and as a writer, she stands in a class by herself. American freethinkers have much to be thankful for in this brave little woman, and in honoring her, they do but honor themselves. I'd like to thank the Sunday Services Committee for the opportunity to speak today. It is indeed an honor. And thanks to Katie Corker for the photo she chose for the cover of the Order of Service. Also a special thank you to Christina Dragon for the music she chose to play today and for the great job she always does. Helen Gardener, freethinker. Helen Gardener was born Alice Chenoweth. She adopted the name Helen Hamilton Gardener as both her professional and personal name in her 30s. She was the youngest of 6 children. She was born January 21st, 1853, near Winchester, Virginia. Her father was the Reverend A.G. Chenoweth. Her mother was the former Catherine Peel. She studied with tutors and attended various local schools, moving to Cincinnati in her late teens, where she graduated high school. After high school, she enrolled in the Cincinnati Normal School, graduating in June 1873, and then she was principal of the same school for 2 years. Later, she lectured on sociology as part of the adult education program at the Brooklyn Institute of Arts and Sciences and tried her hand at writing for local newspapers. During her years in New York City, she met Robert Ingersoll, a famous orator and freethinker. At his persistent request, in January 1884, she began to deliver a series of public lectures. Many of these were collected into her first book, Men, Women, and Gods and Other Lectures, 1885, issued by the radical freethought publication, The Truth Seeker. Ingersoll wrote the preface to her book. He said, "The writer of this little volume has read the Bible with open eyes. The mist of sentimentality has not clouded her vision. She has had the courage to tell the result of her investigations. No human being can answer her arguments. There is no answer. All the priests in the world cannot explain away her objections. There is no explanation. They should remain dumb unless they can show that the impossible is the probable, that slavery is better than freedom, that polygamy is the friend of woman. Woman is not the intellectual inferior of man. She has lacked not mind but opportunity. At best, she secured not opportunity but flattery, the preface to degradation." I said that wrong, didn't I, Nancy? Degradation. She told me that over and over again. She was deprived of liberty, and without that, nothing is worth having. She was taught to obey without question and to believe without thought. There were universities for men before the alphabet had been taught to woman. At the intellectual feast, there were no places for wives and mothers. Even now, in 1885, they sit at the second table and eat the crust and crumbs. Helen said, "I have a right to offer my objections to the Bible. I think that it is fair, at least, to put the case before you as it looks to me, using the Bible as my chief witness. That book, I think, degrades and belittles woman, and I claim the right to say why I think so. The opposite opinion has been stated by hundreds of people, hundreds of times, for hundreds of years, so that it is only fair that I be allowed to bring in a minority report. Women have for a long time been asking for the right to an education, for the right to live on an equal footing with their brothers, while at the same time they have supported a book, a religion, which hold them as the inferiors of their sons and as objects of contempt and degradation with Jehovah. They have sustained a so-called revelation which holds them as inferior and unclean things. Now it has always seemed to me that these women are trying to stand on both sides of the fence at the same time, and that neither foot touches. A religion that teaches a mother that she can be happy in heaven with her children in hell, in everlasting torment, strikes at the very roots of family affection. It makes the human heart a stone. Love that means no more than that is not love at all. No heart that has ever loved can see the object of its affection in pain and itself be happy. It was thought shocking by some persons for a woman to question the correctness of the Bible. She is supposed to be able to go through this world with her eyes shut and her mouth open wide enough to swallow Jonah and the Garden of Eden without making a wry face. It is usually recounted as one of her most beautiful traits of character that she has faith sufficient to float the ark without inspecting the animals. I want folks to be good and true because it is right, not because they are afraid of hell. Fear never made any man a gentleman. Fear never made any woman a true wife or a good mother. Helen joined the revision committee for Elizabeth Cady Stanton's The Woman's Bible. Joining Stanton, Unitarian, and Gardener were Reverend Phoebe A. Hannaford, Universalist, Reverend Augusta Chapin, Universalist, Reverend Olympia Brown, Universalist, Eva Ingersoll, and 14 other prominent women. Marriage for women was to be a condition of bondage, maternity a period of suffering and anguish. In silence and subjection, she was to play the role of a dependent on man's bounty for all her material wants and for all the information she might desire on the vital questions of the hour. She was commanded to ask her husband at home. In 1848, Elizabeth Cady Stanton wrote, "The history of mankind is a history of repeated injuries on the part of man toward woman, having its direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over her." Feeling constrained by nonfiction and the Comstock laws, which prohibited the publication or transmission of obscene material, Gardener turned to fiction to dramatize the dire consequences of sexual assault and spur the public to action. During the early 1890s, Gardener wrote 2 books which dealt with the double standard of morality between the sexes. Is This Your Son, My Lord? And Pray You, Sir, Whose Daughter? Both published by the Arena magazine. Helen said, "A man is valued of men for many things, least of which is his chastity. A woman is valued of men for few things, chief of which is her chastity." The past education of woman gave her an outlook which simply embraced a husband or nothing at all, which was often only a choice between 2 of a kind. If it were not tragic and humiliating, it would be exceedingly amusing to observe the results of a method of thought and a civilization which has proceeded always upon the idea that man is the race and woman is merely an annex to him. Is This Your Son, My Lord? Was very critical of the low age of consent and the ruin of innocence by the lustful desires of outwardly respectable men. In June 1894, Gardener moved to Boston to co-edit the Arena magazine. It became devoted to the single issue of raising the age of sexual consent for girls. Gardener announced this in a special January 1895 edition, The Shame of America. Anti-vice crusader Aaron Powell of New York wrote the contextual essay explaining that the age of consent in most states was 10 or 12, with Delaware the lowest, 7, following the precedent of English common law. By 1896, Helen got 20 states to raise the age of consent to 14, far short of her goal of 18. 8 states refused to raise the age above 12, and only in Kansas and Wyoming, where women had partial suffrage, was it raised to 18. Other contributions to the shame of America were the first female doctor in America, Emily Blackwell, Unitarian, and Frances Willard, president of the Women's Christian Temperance Union, who pronounced strong drink and the degradation of women to be the Siamese twins of vice. Gardener's mission was to highlight not only the grievous sexual crimes against girls, but also the links between women voting and women being able to control what happened to their bodies. If women got the vote, it would be easier to raise the age of sexual consent. Gardener pointed out that some states had increased the age only to add amendments stating that the crime exclusively pertained to cases where girls could prove they had previously been virgins. In 1902, Helen married Colonel Selden Day, a retired Army officer. Upon his retirement from active service, they spent 6 years touring the world. She was invited to lecture at many of the universities in Japan, France, England, and Italy. Helen was decorated by the governments of France and Japan for her public work. She held the Peace Medal of France for her book, An Unofficial Patriot. Younger suffragists, led by Gardener's former colleague, Alice Paul, had been heckling President Wilson. These women had even disrupted his speech at the dedication of the new American Federation of Labor building. This shocked Helen, and she felt she ought to do something. She typed a letter introducing herself to Joseph Tumulty, President Wilson's executive secretary, expressing her astonishment at the young firebrands who did not represent the real suffragists of America. Gardener expressed an outpouring of wrath, decrying the Congressional Union, soon to become the National Women's Party, and explaining the difference between Alice Paul's group and her own, the National American Woman Suffrage Association. No one more sincerely regrets and opposes the heckling of the president than the real suffragists of America who have carried the woman's suffrage banner with dignity. Over the course of 18 months, Gardener nudged the president from an opponent of the federal suffrage amendment into the Susan B. Anthony Amendment's most powerful ally. This was not the first time she had relied on her wit and personal charm to accomplish a seemingly impossible task. This was the story of her life. Helen became vice president of the National American Woman Suffrage Association. In 1917, working as the chief liaison with President Wilson's administration, she met with him 20 times in the next 2 years, influencing his public pro-suffrage statements. Gardener worked to get the Susan B. Anthony Amendment through Congress so that the state ratification process could begin. The difficulty was the Southern wall of opposition. Southern politicians opposed the amendment on grounds that it infringed on states' rights to determine voter qualifications. As the National American Woman Suffrage Association White House emissary, she was the one to whom the president was always willing to grant an appointment. From behind the scenes, she reached out to President Wilson and her Southern friends in Congress to try to dismantle the Southern wall of opposition. In large part, she did this by emphasizing that World War I, like the Civil War before it, was a fight to extend democracy. She presented herself in the National American Woman Suffrage Association as a woman who could advocate for the federal amendment in the South, and she presented herself to Southern politicians as a Southern woman who understood but did not agree with their states' rights objections. Such a dual perspective proved instrumental in the final months of suffrage lobby work in Washington. What made Gardener's tenure on the Congressional Committee so critical was her ability to infiltrate various settings that had long been closed to women and befriend male allies and adversaries alike. She also possessed a remarkable magnetism and social intuition. In dealing with powerful men, she relied on some old-fashioned womanly charm. She prided herself for understanding human nature, and she harbored no illusions about the men with whom she worked. Carrie Chapman Catt and Maud Wood Park credited Gardener's contribution as key to congressional passage, to the extent that National American Woman Suffrage Association's Congressional Committee had succeeded. It was due to Helen's gift for making and holding friends for the cause. Her knowledge of men in public life and familiarity with official custom and legislative procedure, combined with her rare gifts of person, mind, and character, made her the most potent factor in securing passage of the 19th Amendment. The amendment to the Constitution was ratified August 19, 1920. But many women of color were prevented from casting ballots for decades afterward because of poll taxes, literacy tests, overt racism, intimidation, and laws that prevented the grandchildren of slaves from voting. Southern politicians opposed the amendment on grounds it infringed on states' rights to determine voter qualifications. Much of that didn't change until the Voting Rights Act of 1965. In March of 1920, President Wilson nominated Helen Gardener to Theodore Roosevelt's former seat on the Civil Service Commission, making her the highest-ranking woman in the federal government. The civil service fulfilled all of the tasks that government needed to function, employing over 660,000 people. The civil service was the largest employer in the world. After being unanimously confirmed by the Senate, Gardener was sworn in on April 13, 1920. At age 67, she served with distinction for 5 years, retiring at age 72. On her 6-month anniversary, her 2 fellow commissioners wrote President Wilson praising him for his genius in appointing her. Helen died of heart disease at Walter Reed Hospital, July 28, 1925. Her body was cremated and the ashes interred at Arlington National Cemetery. At Helen's memorial, Maud Wood Park said, "Whenever a miracle appeared to happen in our behalf, if the facts could be told, they would prove that Helen was the worker of wonders." Carrie Chapman Catt said, "It is not possible for you to comprehend today how stolid was the resistance to a college education for girls. Helen blazed a trail which made an open road to college education for girls." Also, she said, "I have known Helen for 30 years. I read her books. They appeared at a time when it required great courage to write and publish them. People read them behind closed doors and were hesitant about telling their neighbors." What she said stirred consciences from the Atlantic to the Pacific. I marveled that she dared to shock society in order to make it think. It was that kind of courage that marked her life. And from the Washington Post, August 5th, 1925, Mrs. Gardener was a woman of extraordinary ability. She was a Joan of Arc in the crusade for women's suffrage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. I always love Paul's speeches because he tells us about history of individuals I would have never known or learned about in school. And I think, if I stand corrected, pretty sure you've only ever spoken about women when I've seen.
Oh, no, I've spoken to few women.
Mostly women, though, yeah?
Mostly.
Mostly women. Mostly women in our, not only UU history, but also our American history. So thank you very much. Let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and read our words of offering as we get ready for our offertory here. 2 quick things. One, Thank you to all of those who submit your offerings via pledges every month. We greatly appreciate that. And of course, thank you to those who contribute their time as well as their financial contributions to this congregation. Our words of offering are from Kristen Collins. We give to remind ourselves how many gifts we have to offer. We give to remember that we are part of something bigger than ourselves. We give because we believe in music and sacred space. We give with the faith that together we have enough. And as a special presentation, I'd like to welcome member Janice Messer up, who is going to share with us her music today.
Thank you, of course. Of course. Actually, the music is an old hymn. We gather together, mostly. I showed these words to Joan, and she asked, when did I write them? In the middle of the night, about 5 to 6 weeks ago, just because of everything that was going on, from the Ukraine to the upcoming election. And I figured it's better to sing than to cry. So. Ready? I hope so. If I were a free girl, I'd just wear blue jeans, and then I'd be happy, da-da-da-dee-dum. But could I go swimming, and how about sledding in a ritzy, swanky restaurant? I'd not be allowed. The ones who best love me, my freedom doth scare them. They're afraid that I'll die, or maybe something worse. But even worse than dying is not having freedom. And if you think about it, I think you'll agree. Freedom to laugh, to love, and to pray is the way it should be in the good USA. So sing for your freedom and vote for your liberty, but be prepared to march if it comes down to that. 'Cause there's always some darn fools trying to take it away.
Thank you, Janice. I know you mentioned you wanted to have a insert with the words. If you send them to me or email them to me, we can send them out in one of our future e-blasts. So if you are visiting us for the first time and you're comfortable doing so, please stand and tell us where you're from and how you heard about us. We would love to meet you. Welcome, thank you. A perfect heart is one that has known love and loss, joy and sorrow. A perfect heart is one that has been shared. As joys and sorrows of our community are shared, we ask that you please direct your energy, prayers, and meditation as a gift of compassion and strength. Rise as you are willing and able will be 121, We'll Build a Land, and we will sing all 4 verses.
Closing words are from Helen Gardener. Our Arlington Cemetery is scattered over America in graves little recognized, where lie the great commanders of our bloodless revolution that freed womankind. Lucretia Mott, Ernestine Rose, Julia Ward Howe, Unitarian, Lucy Stone, Unitarian, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Unitarian, and hundreds of others, many of whose names would be new to many of you, but whose deeds were mighty. May it be so.